and welcome to the Influence system in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Influence is an optional subsystem included in the Game Mastery Guide that allows players to gain favor with an NPC. This system is ideal for social encounter situations where multiple checks over a given time will be needed rather than one or two diplomacy or intimidation checks, and this also provides ways for all players to contribute to success rather than just allowing that one player who's an expert in diplomacy to do all the work while the rest of the table just sits and stares and waits for the next scene. The influence system divides a social scene into a number of rounds which can be of varying lengths from 15 minutes to an hour per round, and the number of rounds imposes a time limit for the encounter. For example, if the players are enjoying a 6-course meal with a group of visiting diplomats, then the GM might determine that this is a 6-round social encounter. Once that time limit of 6 rounds is complete, then the dinner is over and the social encounter ends. The goal of the influence system is for players to earn as many influence points as possible before this time limit is up. During each round, every player gets one turn in which they can either use the influence action to gain influence points, or they can use the discover action to learn beneficial information that could aid someone else's influence check. When a player takes the influence action, they roleplay what they say and do during their social interaction to gain favor with the other party. At the end of that roleplay, they make a skill check. This will often be a diplomacy check, but could also be a deception check if they're lying, or even skills that are not thought of as social checks. For example, a bard might make a performance check and play the national anthem of a visiting dignitary to gain their attention and approval. The DC for these checks can be found in the NPC's influence stat block or determined by the GM as usual. For example, a landlord is threatening to evict a theater troupe from a rundown building he owns. If a player uses their accounting lore skill, that's a DC 16 check. If they use crafting, that's also DC 16. Intimidation and performance are both DC 20, diplomacy is DC 22, and deception is DC 24. If a player attempts to use a skill to influence the NPC that is not listed in their influence stat block, or they use one of the listed skills but in a different way than is specified, then the Game Mastery Guide recommends applying the highest listed DC, which in this case would be DC 24. And these DCs may be further modified according to the NPC's resistances and weaknesses. In this example, appeals to sympathy increase the DC of the check by 2, and performing one of the landlord's favorite songs or plays reduces the DC for performance checks by 2. On a success, the player earns 1 influence point for their party. A critical success earns 2 points. Nothing happens on a failure, and on a critical failure, the party loses 1 influence point. The second action players can use in influence encounters is Discover. When a player takes a Discover action, they study the NPC to try and learn their preferences. What do they like and dislike, or what kind of arguments will help sway them? This is a secret check, so the GM rolls a perception check or other appropriate skill for the player in secret and compares the total to DCs that are listed in the NPC's influence stat block. Going back to our example, beneficial information about the landlord may be gained by successful mercantile lore, perception, and society skill checks at their listed DCs. On a success, the player learns one of the following. Which skill that can influence the NPC has the lowest DC? One of the target's biases, one of their resistances, or one of their weaknesses. With a critical success, the player learns 2 of those bits of information, and they could be 2 bits of the same type of information. On a failure, nothing happens, and on a critical failure, the GM provides false information such as the NPC is weak to something that they're actually resistant to. In many regards, the Discover action is very much like a Recall Knowledge action. The NPC's influence stat block will also list the conditions for success and what each total of influence points earns the players at the end of the scene. In the case of our example with Mr. Mallweather the landlord, if the players earn 4 influence points, he will give the theater troupe 1 week to come up with the money they owe him before evicting them. If the players earn 6 points, he'll give them 1 month, and if the players earn at least 8 influence points, then Mr. Mallweather grows a heart, reduces their rent, and forgives half of their debt. The Game Mastery Guide does not provide a lot of hard rules for creating your own influence encounters, but here are a few key points that may help. Influence encounters are assigned levels just like combat encounters. In the example of Mr. Mallweather, that influence encounter is a 3rd level challenge. So, per the DCs by level table, the DCs for the challenge start with a base of 18 and then are modified downward for skills he is susceptible to like accounting, lore, and crafting, and modified upward for skills that he is more alert to like diplomacy and deception. It is recommended that diplomacy be included in the list of influence skills for all of the NPCs, but with an increased DC to encourage players to use discover actions to uncover other means and not simply rely on diplomacy as the solution for all social situations. There is no guidance given for the number of influence points needed for success, but looking at the example in the Game Mastery Guide, as well as a few published adventures that use this system, point thresholds for rewards tend to be 2 points, 4 points, and 6 points in most cases, regardless of the time limit, and bumped up to 4, 6, and 8 points for harder encounters or when the entire party focuses on one NPC instead of spreading out to influence several different NPCs at the same time. Each NPC should have at least 1 resistance and 1 weakness that modifies DCs by 2, but this modifier can also be set to 5 for extreme cases. Also, NPCs may have a resistance that causes the players to lose a point or even end their discussions if a certain action is taken or a certain subject is mentioned. So that's it for a quick look at the influence system from the Game Mastery Guide. For more information about social encounters, see my video on diplomacy and intimidation. A link is provided in the description. And as always, I want to take a brief moment to say thank you to everyone who supports me, whether that's by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, subscribing to the Patreon, buying a super thanks. It all adds up and I greatly appreciate your support. With that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming.